Sean here with BaseMint Comics. It is the weekend, and the tea is made, so it's time for Corner Box Classics. But this isn't any old weekend. This is the first day after the Comic Book Community Awards finalists were announced. So technically, I guess, if I were to have a big head, this would be a Comic Book Community Award nominated to Corner Box Classics, which was very, very, very nice and very humbling. But I imagine that due to that, there are probably fresh eyes on this. So I know that there's a good chunk of, my pals that we've become over the past year that know the drill. But for those of you who are new, because you saw my name amongst the finalists in the Let's Throw 'em a Bone tier, I've been on YouTube for about a year. This all started because my wife was probably tired of hearing me and Hank discuss how we could build web shooters in our garage that we think Thing would beat the Hulk in a fight, and continuously explain the Summers family tree over dinner. So she was like, you should start a YouTube channel and talk to other people about this. Corner Box Classics. Years and years ago, I started reading all of my comics from 1961, Fantastic Four #1, to the present. And I did it in a way where, to immerse myself in it, I would only listen to records that came out at that time period when those issues were released, so that I could sort of get a pop culture feel for the time period of a time period that I, wasn't around for. And then about a year ago, I was like, oh, I could just, like, the channel sort of is what, you know what I mean? Like, this room has existed for years. So I was like, oh, I've already got a backdrop because the whole friggin' room is this. And I was sort of already doing, I was already pedaling up to the shop. That's the thing. I have always, ever since I got into comics in the early 90s, every Wednesday, and I mean kind of daily, I bike, but every Wednesday, no matter the weather, I pedal up to the shop. And when my son Henry was born, against doctor's advice at a very young age, I threw him in the back of a bike carrier, and we started riding the trails up to the comic book shop, and he's been going there ever since. I imagine that's where he'll have his first job or whatever, as long as I keep on buying comics to keep the doors open. Anyways, yeah, so that's it. The whole Corner Box Classic thing is me reading what would have come out a specific week in chronological order. And so now I am up to October 5th, 1982. So you get the feel of the bike ride thing. I'm going to kick it over to a montage of a year's worth of trips with me and the kid. And it's 2 minutes and 43 seconds. So if you're like, I don't want to watch that, 2 minutes and 43 seconds, you can just fast forward to the next bit.
Jump out of line, one last
All right, we are back. That was the trail rides from the past year. You could see, you know, summer, fall, winter, spring, back to summer. And the tune, I was in a band for years, so on the Wednesday things, thanks to McGroovy's suggestion when he was like, you should really stop using the stock music and play some of your tunes because they're not half bad. I was like, you know what? They aren't half bad. And I don't get a copyright strike, so if you hear music in there, that was another lifetime ago. Yeah. Okay, so that is Cornerbox Classics. If on October 5th, 1982, I was able to bike, I wasn't at this time because I would have been about to turn 1. But if I had been a teen at that time, these are the comics that I would have picked up after I biked to my comic book shop while listening to Bruce Springsteen's album Nebraska, released in late September 1982. And I mean, you know, who doesn't want to ride their bike up to the comic book shop while weeping to themselves about the tragedy of the characters in Atlantic City? It's a fucking great, sad song. All right. First up, Amazing Spider-Man number 236, Death Knell, released October 5th, 1982, written by Roger Stern, pencils by John Romita Jr., inks by Frank Giacoa, letters by Joseph Rosen, colors by Bob Sharon, and a creepy cover by John Romita Jr. and Frank Giacoa. As we all know, some of our characters at the Daily Bugle have been investigating the Brand Corporation, and Will-O-the-Wisp has been going after some higher-ups at the Brand Corporation because of what they did to him. And they also experimented on the tarantula, and you'll never guess, that's right, they turned him into a giant spider. So that is where we open up in this issue is, you know, the higher-ups at Brand that aren't involved in this are quickly trying to cover this up. You get a quick recap as one of the dudes who is trying to, you know, alert the rest of the Brand Corporation that this is going on. And I got to admit, one of the things that I sort of love about all of this is, like, the Roxxon oil thing has happened like recent years with comics, where I've noticed that's sort of all over the place. But then you go back and you read the classics and you're like, oh man, it's been there the whole time. And the same thing with Brand. I like the fact that Brand has always sort of been in mutation. It harkens back to the Amazing Adventures issues, where that's where Hank McCoy, when he left the X-Men before joining the Defenders, first manipulated his DNA to turn gray and furry. So, you know, I'm a big continuity fan. So, needless to say, Tarantula, like, Spidey's trying to calm Will-O-the-Wisp down from killing anybody. He's not having it. Neither is Tarantula. So Spidey takes all of them on. And this is basically just Spidey trying to keep the Brand dude away. I can't think of his name right now off the top of my head, and that is the type of preparation that you can expect here at BaseMint Comics. Sorry, man. Needless to say, this is just Pete swinging through the city, beautifully drawn by John Romita Jr., trying to get Will-O-the-Wisp away from the guy. And then it cuts to, like, these news reporters, and this dude's name is Geraldo Jimenez. And I was like, is that actually, like, is this based off of Geraldo? So I did some looking up, and that is not the case. But I mean, could you imagine just being like, you're you know, you just got off the job, your cameraman's putting this stuff away, you don't think that there's a story where you're at, you're lighting a cigarette, and then all of a sudden you see that terrifying tarantula man just like lumber across the tops of some buildings. I mean, more power to him that he's like, this is a story. Call the station. Because if I saw a ginormous 8-foot tarantula crawling across the tops of the buildings, I would the right out. Like I'd be gone. But you know, that's why I'm not a newsman in the 80s, I suppose. So Pete outsmarts the Will-O-the-Wisp and kind of gets him to phase through this building, and passes right into one of 3 operating dynamos, and has his molecules slide around those of the spinning turbines. Highly charged electromagnetic fields are disrupted with unwanted consequences for all concerned, which basically means this disorientates the hell out of Will-O-the-Wisp, and he is down for the count. So then Pete is finally able to kind of talk to him. And right as he's able to do this, he sort of webs him up, but that's when the tarantula has discovered where Pete was hiding the brand guy. So now it is once again, now Will-O-the-Wisp is kind of out of it, but Pete is now fighting this. The news guys have stumbled upon Spider-Man fighting a giant spider, which I'm sure, you know, that would be amazing. And you can even see, you know, you can check out all the people at their homes watching. This lady is like way too into Spider-Man getting his butt kicked by a giant tarantula. And Will-O-the-Wisp goes in for the kill while Spider-Man is tangling with the tarantula, but then changes his mind. And right at this moment, I love this part of it, the tarantula winds up webbing Pete up, and right here he basically realizes, like, holy shit, it's coming out of my ass. And he realizes that he has been turned into an actual tarantula. And so he starts freaking out. The cops who are now on the scene then, and this was really sad, like he basically, like, tarantula is screaming for them to kill him. And of course, they're going to be like, holy shit, it's an 8-foot tarantula. And so they unload on him, and then he falls and, like, could you... Just like, as I was reading this last night, as he falls to his death and like splatters all over the floor with this thud, and there's a ton of bystanders around, and you know they got hit with spider chunks. Can you imagine you're just in New York and you're like, oh, I want to see that. Well, holy smokes, I've never seen Spider-Man before in my life. You got your groceries in your arms, and all of a sudden you're just covered in a ginormous spider gut. I would not be okay with that. So Will-O-the-Wisp, you know, decides Pete was in the right, didn't want to kill the brand guy, that he'd be stooping to their level. And so he takes off. And then Pete is back at the Daily Bugle. You know, and one of the higher ups at Brand is basically like, you know, on the news, and he's like, we're you know, absolutely shocked to learn of the corruption in our subsidiary operations. The chairman of the board has asked me to personally investigate, blah, blah, blah. And Pete's like, oh, hey, like they're doing an investigation. And I love that Robbie, and this is like, we need more Robbie Robertson. We need more Robbie Robertsons in the world, and we need more Robbie Robertsons in current Spider-Man, because he is immediately like, yeah, I don't think that's as good as you think it is, Pete. Like, I don't think it's going to, like, it's nice that you're altruistic and you think that they're going to do the right thing, but Robbie definitely has the idea that they are not. Not a big spider guy. I've had to get over it because my wife is far more terrified of them than I am, and one of us has to be the get spiders out of the house person. So that has fallen on me until I can train Hank to trap them. We're close. But I enjoyed this. I'm kind of right now. I'm loving the Stern run, but this was an enjoyable arc. But I'm actually kind of enjoying Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, more, and I know that's because I have a soft spot for like the side characters, the gang, you know. So, but I mean, that is to say, like, this is like someone handing me a slice of cake and a brownie. Like, both are fantastic. I'm gonna have them both. I'm not like, one's not better than the other. They're both great desserts. That's how I feel about the 2 Spider-Man books right now. All right. So, Next, Captain America number 277, In Thy Image, released October 5th, 1982, written by J.M. DeMatteis, pencils by Mike Zeck, inks by John Beatty, letters by Jack Morelli, colors by Bob Sharon, and a cover by Mike Zeck and John Beatty. Beatty? I met him once at a con. He was very nice, but I don't know how to pronounce his last name. My bad. Last issue. Let's see. The last couple of issues, Steve has run into his friend Arnie Roth, who sort of stumbled upon him while he was out with his gal Bernie Rosenthal. Arnie has a roommate named Mike, who is taken over, and like his mind was put into the body of this machine. Cap had to defeat that. They kind of have been, they've been hammering home the fact that they're roommates, but they're not roommates. It was 1982. You know what I mean? They couldn't outright say it, but they, you know. So Cap's trying to help him because Arnie loves Mike, okay? And he doesn't want him to be trapped in a robot body. But now Arnie is trapped too, and it has been revealed that this has all been done by the hand of Baron Zemo, who has gotten Arnim Zola on his side, and one of my least favorite characters, Vermin. I say that because probably like 15 years ago, there was a company called Graphic Audio that did like audiobooks of popular comic book stories, and not like one person read them, but like full on like cast of characters, sound effects, like old radio plays, which I love. I took a field trip when I was a little kid, and we like made one when I was in upper elementary school, I would assume. And I've been fascinated with that sort of thing ever since. Obviously, like we all, you know, we know that on October 30th, I always listen to the War of the Worlds broadcast. I have a vinyl of that, sort of super into that type of thing. And so there's quite a few X-Men ones that they did, Days of Future Past, Gifted. They did one for Secret Wars, there's a couple Fantastic Fours that I have, a few Spider-Mans. One of them is Kraven's Last Hunt. And whoever the voice actor was for Vermin either did a terrible job or did an absolutely fantastic job. And I think it's fantastic because I'm supposed to hate Vermin. Well, I think you're supposed to feel kind of bad for Vermin. But he was just very grating as I would work and I was listening to this. So there's that. So Zemo is, you know, lamenting to Cap here how he's been defeated by him, and basically calls for, like, as Cap is like about ready to unleash on these group of characters, he's like don't come after me yet. Let me kind of explain my master plan here, because if you don't allow me to do this, I'm just going to kill Arnie Roth. And that's where he lets it be known that he is as merciless as his father. And that's when Cap realizes, like, oh, you're not the actual Baron Zemo that I got rid of back in World War II. You are his kid. So, you know, Zemo does a solid job of walking Cap through the family history, which Cap isn't buying. And then, like, you get the mask explanation and how this one wasn't bonded to him like it was his father back in... there are 2 issues of Captain America referenced in here that I do not have, because my Cap collection is like some of the Kirby run, and then basically a complete run once we get to the Brownstone years, as I've often talked about, Roger McKenzie, which I will talk about at the end of the episode. Very sad. The news that we got last night, that he passed. He was a great writer, and I'll get into it at the end of it. So quickly, Zemo points out that he has been keeping tabs on Captain America, and he is aware that he is Steve Rogers, and he is aware that this cast of characters introduced by Steve trying to have a normal life, which is what drew me into the book, him like leaving Avengers Mansion, moving into the brownstone, this cast, you will grow to know, as long as you're sticking with the channel, that I love a solid supporting cast of normal folks. In fact, Roger McKenzie, bringing it back to that, even though I said I wasn't going to, created one of the greatest non-powered characters in the Marvel Universe in Ben Urich. So we got to thank him for that. So, love this gang that lives in the building with Steve. It's a big part of the draw of the book for me right then. And so then Zola is revealed to be this character named, it's not actually Zola, it's this character named Doughboy, who can turn into anyone that he, clearly a shapeshifter, a gnarly looking one at that. And I guess he was, yeah, okay. So it is Doughboy, and then he turns into a character named Primus. The problem is this is all referenced from a Captain America 212, which is like right before I get into Cap. So I have no recollection of this issue. But this is the beauty of editor's notes, is that's the type of thing that when Hank and I pedal up to the shop on Wednesday, you know I'll be looking for a copy of Captain America number 212. So Doughboy or Primus, whatever you want to call him, shapeshifts into a Captain America. Or Steve, and that's not great. So basically, Zola is like, I have you here, Captain America. I'm going to mess with you, and I am going to send this guy off to live your life and mess with your people. It's a whole, like, this is clearly, this is good comic book stuff. Then we get an interlude where they are trying to use Cap's image as a marketing for a morality and media campaign. And this particular guy that they're trying to sell the advertising thing to for his company to do it had a falling out with Steve because he was anti-Semitic, and Steve wasn't standing for that. So I believe it's kind of hinted where this guy's like, I've got the perfect artist for that. And so I believe that he is going to reach out to Steve Rogers as a olive branch to show that he is getting better from his idiotic views that he showed and espoused in earlier issues. Steve is chained up with Vermin. Mike and Arnie are on the table, and Zola has put them back, both of them, into these like mindless, like robot fleshy bodies. So they start fighting. Vermin and Cap are able to, basically when they get attacked, they kind of mess up the wall where they're chained. So they're able to get out of there and start attacking. But Cap is trying to get Vermin to calm down and not attack mercilessly, because he knows that like the mind of Mike and Arnie are inside of these machines. And so Cap gets knocked down, and Vermin goes in, cuts one of them right across the brain pattern. The thing immediately falls over, and Mike starts freaking out, obviously. And so, like, Cap's like, oh, Lord. Michael just spasmed and shrieked as the mutate body toppled. That must have been the one with his consciousness in it. And now the other one's collapsing, and it's Arnie reacting to the loss of Michael. And Cap looks at him and he's like, Arnie, are you all right? And he's like, forget about me, Steve. Michael's dead. My Michael's dead. And you just stood there and let it happen. And that's where I was like, see, I was right about my roommate theory. But they couldn't just come out and be like, these two guys are in a relationship in 1982, which is dumb. And then it cuts to Steve showing up as Bernie's opening up the door to her apartment. But we know that's not Steve. Then there's a backup story, which is dealing with Sam Wilson is running for Congress, I believe, but he is snapped into a character called Snap Wilson. And this all is in reference to something that happened long before I was reading Cap. So I don't have any reference points for the Snap Wilson thing, but clearly he is having a psychotic break. It's drawn by Zach. It's written by DeMatteis. It's good. But I've got to add that kind of to the list of like, oh, I should check out those issues of Captain America so I have a better understanding of that. It's interesting that that's like relegated to a backup issue as opposed to just being kind of blended. I suppose it's nice. Like I could always choose to not read the backup issue, but I've sort of always like, if I pay for a comic, I'm like, I got to read the whole thing cover to cover. I assume we're all like that, but if you're not, if you're like, no, if I saw a backup story that I wasn't interested in, I'm just not reading it, that's fine too. All right, so up next, The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones #1, released October 5th, 1982, written and penciled by John Byrne. We all know how I feel about John Byrne. Inks by Terry Austin, letters by Joseph Rosen, colors by Bob Sharon, and a beautiful cover by Terry Austin. If you've been following along, you know that pretty much everything that I'm a completionist when it comes to runs, and there are very few things that I'm bringing in here that I don't have complete runs for, or won't complete by the time that I get to them. But I will admit, a huge Indiana Jones fan. It is one half of why Henry is named Henry. And I have the movie adaptations of the comics, but I only have issues 1 and 2. However, last month's solicitations, Marvel announced, I think it was at San Diego Comic-Con, that they are putting the complete collection out in these like leather-bound, look very Indiana Jones complete collections. And so I pre-ordered the hell out of those. So this, I only have the first 2 issues in single issue form. I've looked into completing the run, but it's pretty pricey for, I read this first issue. I mean, it's drawn and written by John Byrne, so it's good. I like, John Byrne's my favorite artist. And John Byrne drawing and writing Indiana Jones at the height of a post Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, this book's gonna be good. It's drawn by John Byrne. It's super fun. The story was good. It's Indiana Jones, they're jet setting. He's taking off and going up against some bad guys, but I'm also kind of like, it's going to be, I think those come out like before Christmas. So it's going to be a while, so that before I can finish it. But I read the first issue. I'm going to read the second issue. It's good. I'm excited to finish the entire series because I have never read it. Which, I mean, probably should have read this first issue and the second issue before I committed to buying the entire volume. But first issue was good. It's Indiana Jones. What is also great about that is that ad for the New Mutants. That's a good looking ad. So yeah, if I had been a kid in 1982, I would have picked this up. I'm not going to go through it like I go through the rest of the issues strictly because it's like, I don't have the rest of it, and I won't have it until it comes out. But if you've ever read that, have anyone watching this, has anyone read the entire Further Adventures of Indiana Jones? How is it? Did I make a mistake by ordering expensive collected editions of it? I know, because I'm a single issue guy, but this was one of those things where I was like, I think it'll be cool, and I have the movie room over there in the room. If you're new, there's a room tour. Looks different now. I'm going to do another one because I had to replace the floors. But yeah, so let me know if you've read that series and if you think if you're an Indiana Jones fan, if it holds up. Like, what of the 5 films, what film would you compare it to? then you got to give me your orders on what you think of the films. Micronauts, number 44, Keep the Home Fires Burning, released October 5th, 1982, written by Bill Mantlo, penciled by Jackson Geiss, inks by Daniel Bellinati, letters by Michael Higgins, colors by Bob Sharon, and a cover by Jackson Geiss. We all know the deal. Friend of mine, whom I love dearly, Jerry, he was the one who suggested that he was always like, Micronauts came out when he was in his youth, and he loved it. And so there was a shop that was going out of business in our area, and they had a sale that could not be passed up. I went out, spent the day. It was a great time. And I wound up piecing together an entire run of Micronauts while I was there. And so I was like, sure, I'll add it there. And it has had a couple highs, but mostly for me, lows. And so I almost gave up. Like, I was almost like, I put the question out there the last time that I covered a Micronauts issue, and was basically like, if I'm treating this as though I was a kid pedaling up to the shop and I was buying this book and I was like, oh, it's not for me, should I drop it and then not talk about it? And then the consensus was, you should drop it and not talk about it, from the people who responded to the question. Then I read this today and I was like, it's still not my favorite. Part of the process of why I've been doing this is like, there are, I don't have an exact count, but there are over 17,000 comics in my collection. And I have been obviously really, like, I back in the day at my shop, some of the pals that I'm with that are old timers, they like, we'll still get together occasionally, even though that shop's gone. And every now and then when I run into one of them, they're like, I retired. And then I pared down my collection. I got quite a few of the old guard from my area that I grew up in that are very much like, we're, you don't want to, eventually you kind of hit a point where you're like, what am I keeping? What am I getting rid of? And so part of my thing of like reading everything is like, okay, are there going to be dips? Like, are there, I have complete runs of lots of stuff. And are there dips in there where it's like, oh, I don't like this creative team? And do I, this all started because like, when Henry was little, my wife, like right before I started the channel and started doing this, she was like, would you want him to go downstairs and pick a random comic book off of the wall? And no matter what it was, would you be happy that was his first comic? And I was like, because it made me realize there was a lot of stuff down here where I was like, probably not the best. But before I started just like axing stuff and getting rid of stuff, I was like, I should read everything, because we spend so long, like my whole life, like I've never, when I got into comics, I never got out. I never like, it's been a thing. And so, you go to local shows and stuff, not like big cons, but like, the local ones where it's like seedy dudes with cigarette smelly boxes selling comics out of the back of their cars. And, you go home with a stack this big and it winds up and I was like, I got to read everything. So that's what I'm doing. So I was ready to throw in the towel with Micronauts. There's a couple issues. There's like a two-parter with Ant-Man, and I think I love that one just because it went full Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. This one they finally, and you even get some like the selling point for me. The selling point for me right now is the art. Like, Jackson Geiss has now joined the crew, and I'm assuming being on Micronauts means that this is probably, because I'm familiar with him from X Factor and some other things, but I'm imagining that this was maybe it's certainly one of his first Marvel assignments from what I can see. So you get kind of Arcturus ran, kind of going through like a montage of the people that they've sort of run across. And that's been, I guess, maybe the draw that's keeping me into reading Micronauts right now, is like they definitely do a healthy dose of peppering in characters that I really care about, because I haven't grown super fond of any of the characters in the Micronauts, other than maybe Bug. But that's mostly because my introduction of him was in the 2000s, like Annihilation stuff and the cosmic stuff written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning. But this is Arcturus and the bioship trying to get back to the microverse at this point. And this kind of, it's the same lament that I have with the Khazar book, where they're constantly not in the Savage Land. Most of this book, they have not been in the microverse. It's been them sort of doing the oh no, we're little people in a big world, which is great. But it also, like, it's, you know, it's sort of that, like, I want a little bit more microverse stuff in my Micronauts. So this is the two of them kind of traveling back through the ship. It is drawn beautifully, and that is what kept my attention during this, as they're traveling back. There are just some really spectacular pages in this. They wind up running into the time travelers. It's beautifully drawn by Jackson Guys. So this is like, I sort of, in an X-Men 60s sort of way, it's like, I love all that stuff because X-Men's my thing. But it's kind of like, all of a sudden you get that, like, I'm wondering if this book is going to sort of end in the same way, where it's like, oh, Roy Thomas and Neil Adams hop on at the very end, but it's too late, but it's fantastic, you know. And that's kind of how this felt. It's them racing back to the microverse. The big bad, who's like, he's getting married and gonna make the other Micronauts fight to the death as a wedding gift to his bride. And that's when our hero shows up, but it is revealed that it was, like, not their guy. I cannot think of his name right now. That's how little I have honestly cared about most of this book. I've sort of checked out as I was reading it. Sort of reveals that he was never a bad guy at all, but Baron Karza had hidden himself away in him and then killed him and emerged. And so as I was reading this, I was like, oh damn, okay, this is the turn, because I think there's only 8 or 9 issues left in the series before it is rebooted, and I do not have volume 2, and I have no plans to get volume 2. But Baron Karza is reborn. And that first chunk of Micronauts, the first few issues, maybe the first year of the book, first 10, 12 issues, drawn by Michael Golden, really, really good. But the further along that it went, the more I was just like, okay, maybe it could have just been that first year. I love the idea of how the story was created, that it was like Bill Mantlow's kid got the toys for Christmas, and he loved them so much that Bill Mantlo, like, wanted to flesh out the world, and so he pitched the comic book to Marvel, and they bought it. And, like, as a dad, like, I think that's awesome. So I would never dunk on the book because of that. It's just sort of not. I think that my pal's love for the book is based a lot on his nostalgia for it, and I begrudge no one that, because I am entrenched in some of the things that I will defend and deeply love based on nostalgia. And I'm going to pause here because I don't know if you're picking it up, but my wife is absolutely wailing the hell out of some chicken with a mallet, so I'm going to let her finish that. All right, so the last issue that I would have picked up on October 5th, 1982, The Mighty Thor, This Battlefield Earth. Written by Doug Mensch, pencils by Alan Kupperberg, inks by Jim Moody, letters by Janice Chang, and colors by George Roussos, with a cover by Alan Kupperberg and Alan Len Weiss. Alan Lee Weiss, sorry. So this opens up with Blake in his Chicago office, and all of a sudden he is visited by a ginormous Odin head, and thankfully his nurse cannot see it. She just thinks that Don's crazy because he's talking to himself about his own father. So he excuses himself, goes into the office that's attached to his apartment, taps his walking stick, turns into Thor, and then suddenly the gang from Asgard is suddenly in this very tiny office building. And so he's like, I'm going to split here for a second because this is too close of quarters for all of us. I need to figure something else out, because basically Odin's like, we can't be in Asgard because the god of war Tyr, Tyr, I don't know, and Loki have enlisted the serpent, and they are attacking Asgard and destroying the golden apples. Those are very important. So quickly we get Thor showing up at Stark International, talks to Tony, and Tony agrees to allow him to use a defunct computer room that is being rebuilt, and gives him an entire staff. So then Thor gets the rest of the Asgardians to arrive. Volstagg in particular is famished, so he requests that the first thing that the gang does that has been employed by Stark is to get them food, and they do. And as the Asgardians are eating, they ask, like, what is this feast? And then one of the guys is like, it's a Pizza Hut. And so I chuckled at the idea of this like ornate Asgardian table, and then all these Asgardians in their armor, Sif over there, enjoying Pizza Hut pizza. I just thought that was, I don't know, it was a funny visual. And I enjoy stuff like that. So, suddenly things in the world start going bad. There's a news report about it, and it is there's lots and lots of natural disasters happening, but Odin and the rest of the Asgardians recognize that this is not based on natural disasters. It is because the Asgardian serpent is wrapping itself around the earth and crushing it, and so they must fight against Tyr, Loki, and his armies. And in typical Loki fashion right here, once he finally shows up and sees the Asgardians, he's like, nope, thought about taking over Asgard, but really didn't have it. Like, it was not on my bucket list to take on these Asgardians and destroy the Earth. So he quickly switches sides, and then a battle ensues amongst all these characters as the Stark employees, one of them winds up helping out in the battle, which thoroughly impresses Odin, because he's like, oh, I can sort of see why my son has such a soft spot for Midgard, if this is how, brave the mortals are. And so Thor at this point, like while the battle is raging, takes off because he's hatched a plan that he is going to go back to Asgard, find Hamir, this giant fella, who unleashes this Asgardian bull on him. Thor quickly dispatches that thing, and they hop in a giant boat, and he's using Hamir and the goat as bait to get the serpent to uncoil from the earth and follow them. So it takes the bait, goes after them, which immediately stops the disasters from happening. Thor takes on the serpent, winds up wrapping the serpent around the world tree, and hastily defeats him. And that is when Odin and the rest of the Asgardians, along with the mortals, dispatch Tyr and his army, and the mortals are given the wonderful view of actually seeing the Rainbow Bridge, and they're like, this is the gateway to heaven, and so on and so forth, and all's well that ends well, as our Asgardians wind up back in Asgard, and the golden immortal apples are safe and not under the care of Thor and Loki. Love this cover. Up until recently, my Thor run starts with the Walt Simonson run, but I wound up going back to like the late 200s or whatever, and have thoroughly been enjoying this era of Thor. I imagine we're probably, as we get closer to Simonson's initial run, there's probably going to be, when like a new writer takes over and they don't, sometimes there's like a growing pain or like a weird, almost like fill-in issues, maybe. I keep on waiting for that to happen in Thor, where it's going to be like, oh, this is just kind of a throwaway film. But even if it is a throwaway, like just sort of one-off Thor story, it's been really good, and I'm happy that I went back further than the Simonson stuff and didn't just start there. It's been nice to like. I really like Alan Kupperberg's pencils, and that's sort of a name that I would not have known if not for my little Corner Box Classics Let's Read All My Stuff exercise. And so, speaking of that, we got to talk about Roger McKenzie. That is a name that I would not have been familiar with if not for going back and actually, because like when I got into comics, and I've talked about this at length in previous videos, like my origin story, all that type of stuff. When you're a kid and you're getting into comics, like I legitimately thought that it was just, like Disney animation. Like I know all those guys have names, but you know what I mean? Where it's like an in-house and there's a house style and they just kind of pump it out. And I never really thought, there were some names that stuck out to me when I was a kid. Obviously, like I started reading comics in the 90s. There were names that rose above the rest. I grew up in a time period of Wizard magazine, Top 10 and all that crap. And I say that with some reverence and some recognizing that, like, as much as I loved the stuff of my youth, there's a story that you can find. It's archived on the internet now, and I don't know what it was written for, New York Times, something like that, but it was Herb Trimpe talking about that time period in Marvel and him like basically like having this historic run on Hulk, and then kind of just getting like brushed aside for the younger crowd, which I mean, I get it. And like part of it reads a little bit like frustrated dude who's older, but I suppose as I get older, I understand more where he's coming from in this art. Anyways, point is that like as a kid, I probably wouldn't have liked Herb Trimpe's art, and I understand this article. Like now I look back and I read this article or whatever, and I'm like, oh, what a dummy I was. You know what I mean? I've talked often about how like as a kid I didn't like Dave Cockrum, and now I can't get enough of Dave Cockrum stuff. And there's names that just, by the time that I was into it, I talk about this a lot in music. One of the reasons why I did the music thing is because, like, you look at the 60s and you're like, for the genre of music that I am most into, you would think it was just all Beatles, and you'd forget bands like the Searchers and stuff like that, Herman's Hermits, all that type of stuff. Because, the further away we get from that time period, it's the same thing with the 90s. Like when it always cracks me up, like 90s grunge bands are the only bands that are mentioned. And it's like, no, there was a plethora of fantastic bands from that time period that will just eventually at some point sort of get lost to time because people, for some odd reason, only focus on like 5 or 6 things. So this is a very, very long way to get to the fact that I picked a random issue of Captain America to read a few years ago, and I was like, damn, this was really good. It was, point is it's the one that made me go like, oh, I should go further back in my Captain America collection and kind of finish that run. And that's sort of where I fell into this, the Brownstone thing that I talked about earlier. And one of the issues that really struck me is a Roger McKenzie issue, written issue number 245. It is The Night of the Nazi Hunter. Beautifully drawn by Carmine Infantino. It inked by Joe Rubinstein. It is this story where basically Cap in the brownstone that he has moved into after leaving the Avengers Mansion to become kind of a freelance artist working in advertising, doing Captain America stuff. He has met some people in his building, and one of them is this older woman named Anna. And so in this story, you're sort of following Anna around as well as dealing with, like, she's the B story, Cap's the A story, and they eventually kind of merge, where Anna is sort of going over, she's having some flashbacks to her youth, growing up in a Nazi concentration camp, and she stumbles upon, in her comings and goings in the city, she runs across someone who looks exactly like one of the people who was a higher up in the camp. And basically, like, in this, she sort of winds up tracking this guy down. You know, the issue is called Night of the Nazi Hunter. But it is a great sort of one and done. You know, Anna has no idea that this guy, Steve, in her building that she's befriended is actually Captain America. At this point, she is unaware of this. And it's just sort of this, just a fascinating little, like, I use the word fun because it's an enjoyable issue. The subject matter of it is heavy, but it's heavy in a good way that comics are fantastic at covering. And Cap trying to convince this woman not to kill this guy is a part of the story. And it is fantastic. It's one of the stories that made me go, oh, I should finish a run of Captain America. And that's what did it. And then my Daredevil run. I have some early Daredevil issues. I'm trying to track down any Stiltman, because, come on, who doesn't love Stiltman? But Silver Samurai was first introduced. He's an X-Men character, obviously, so I would have his first appearance. Lady Deathstrike, I think she first appeared in Daredevil. Have those issues, but then when it comes to a solid chunk of Daredevil, when I was thinking about it, it was like, okay, I can obviously start at the Frank Miller run, and that's great. I know it's going to be great. But I was like, you know, at the end of the day, I sort of like when it comes to the X-Men, I think that the X-Men should always be somewhat filtered through the eyes of Scott Summers. That he should be a focal point of that. That if the story were to ever end, like if comic books, if X-Men comics were to ever end, it needs to end from Scott Summers' point of view. And so I was thinking about Daredevil, and I was like, where should I? And I was like, I'm like, first appearance of Ben Urich. Like, what a great character to have as an audience member to kind of view this fantastical life through. It's so Roger McKenzie did that. You know, so we got him to thank for a fantastically dark Daredevil run that wasn't like too dark, but still, you know, good dark before Frank Miller took over. And I would let him talk about it much more, but, you know, love Mr. McGroovy. And this was the issue that got him into comics. So I was like, oh, I should spend some time tonight reading some Roger McKenzie written stuff. So I think I'm gonna give these two a go tonight in honor of a great writer that I might have overlooked if not for this thing that I've been doing, which I really appreciate. Because like I said, in Cornerbox Classics, I constantly, you know, I read the entire credit of the comic book. And that's important because it's helped me, you know, you don't realize how many comics, how much I once joked with Tom Orzechowski when I met him at a convention that I've probably read his handwriting more than any other humans on the planet other than my own, because he was the letterer of Uncanny X-Men for decades. And then you started like Janice Chang, like holy smokes, man, the amount of stuff in late 70s, early 80s, and I don't know when she stops being a letterer because I don't know yet because we haven't gotten to those issues yet. But it is impressive to me just the amount of work and familiarizing myself with characters that I didn't creators that I didn't necessarily know would have such a big impact on me. So that is important, and it is good. Let this be a reminder to us in this, that we should give the flowers to everyone in this industry that we're enjoying while they are here, not just posthumously. So there is that. That is Cornerbox Classics for this week. I thoroughly enjoyed, like legitimately thoroughly enjoyed everything this week. I know I didn't go deep into the Indiana Jones or the Micronauts, but I did enjoy both of those issues. Man, yeah, it's a really great time period. So new comic book Wednesday, more Cornerbox Classics, you know the deal. So yeah, let me know what you would have enjoyed, and let me know if you're gonna dig out some Roger McKenzie classics from your collection to read in his honor. And I will see you on Wednesday. Thanks for taking this ride with me. Bye. Oh, Smoke. Hey, you should, I think I mentioned the CBC Awards thing. I'll put the thing down there. I wouldn't mind a vote. I mean, spread the love around. There's a couple, people there that I'm voting for because I care about their output dearly. So, do with that what you will. Vote for who you want to. It's all in good fun and supposed to be a good time and not to be taken too seriously, I suppose. However, I'm up for 3 categories. And really, the one where I'm up for tea drinking as a distinctive trademark, if there was one that I want to win, that's the one. So you know what to do. All right, I'll see you on Wednesday.